Hi, everybody. Given our piece last week on tariffs in your portfolio and the ongoing additional tariffs and counter tariffs, Amanda and I wanted to provide a little bit more information about how tariffs actually work, what is the trade deficit, and does it actually matter overall? So there's a lot of this, and you're hearing this especially when it comes to the way that the administration is trying to phrase this. We have a trade deficit with other countries, and so they are ripping us off. Now, what is a trade deficit and how is it calculated? So the very interesting thing about trade deficits are these are calculated by the country that receives the goods, not their ultimate destination. For example, we have an enormous trade surplus with the Netherlands, but we have a trade deficit with the European Union. Why is that? Because the Netherlands have many of the ports through which US goods are imported to the European Union. From the Netherlands, then they go all over the country. So it's really difficult to say that somebody's taking advantage of us based on a trade deficit or a trade surplus. Take another example, Australia. Australia has a huge surplus, trade surplus with China. Why? Because Australia has many natural resources like iron ore, which the Chinese need in order to power their economy. And that brings us to a second point, which is that tariffs, trade deficits, and trade in general doesn't often have to do with did I rip you off or are you taking advantage of me? It really has to do with who has the goods and services that somebody else needs. Right now, a lot of the manufacturing for many things that are input into final products like cars are done outside of this country. They are brought together so that we in the US can put together high-end value-added products, which then either we sell elsewhere or we sell here for cheaper than if they were manufactured here. So as we start looking through what's the right solution, do we need to balance the trade deficit? I think one of the things to keep in mind is it's probably an apocryphal saying, but Einstein said, make the solution simple, but not simpler. And so there's a range of effective solutions that aren't Rube Goldberg complex, but they also aren't distilling everything down into black and white. Because as we see with something like a trade deficit, it's not necessarily black and white because who we have a trade surplus with could just be because they're the port of entry into a larger part of the world, like the Netherlands. Singapore is another great example. It could also be because the country that is exporting, the country that has a trade surplus, has goods or services that other countries need to power their economy. So trade is a good thing in terms of making sure that goods and services get where they can be used most efficiently. Now, of course, trade has downsides too, and we can talk about that in another piece. But we do think it's really, really important for everybody here to remember that just basing a trade policy on the trade deficit is not going to lead to any optimal solution because that's just one part of a very complex economic picture. We hope you have a good rest of the day. Please reach out with any questions. Thanks.